Welcome back to the sixth part of Module 3 from the Child Health and Development Project Mississippi Thrives video series on supporting the development of your child's brain architecture. We continue on the subject, Oh Behave, helping families create a behavioral support toolbox, presented by Liz Gill.
Now we're going to talk about how to address challenging behaviors that might still be happening even after implementing the strategies we discussed earlier in this module. Like we said before, it does take some time for the behaviors to change, especially when you're trying these new techniques. So have some patience and trust in the process. As you get more comfortable implementing the new techniques, your child will get more used to knowing what to expect, and you will see those behaviors start to change. If an unwanted behavior occurs, but it's not aggressive or destructive, ignore it. It's possible to stop some behaviors through consistent ignoring. The key is not so much the ignoring, but instead it's the emphasis you've placed on praise when they change their behavior. They will learn that they're not going to get attention when they engage in these unwanted behaviors, but they will get attention when they engage in positive behaviors or when they simply stop these unwanted behaviors. We know it is not easy to ignore unwanted behaviors, but it can work. Try to stick with it. Of course, you have to choose what you can ignore. So while you're ignoring, you're going to try to have that calm, neutral expression. You're not going to explain what you're doing. Your child will figure it out, especially when you catch your child doing things well. So if they're whining and you want to ignore the whining, as soon as they stop whining, even if they're just taking a breath to whine some more, you can tell them, "Oh, you're being so quiet." You can find something to praise them for and give them attention. You can change the subject, you can try to distract them, but you're not giving them the attention for the whining. Here are some attention-seeking behaviors that can be improved with active ignoring. The reason we call it active ignoring is because you're very thoughtful about how and when you ignore. You have your system down. You're not just tuning your child out, but you're really trying to withhold attention when they show these behaviors. And then you're thinking about how you can praise the opposite of these behaviors. When your child is not showing these behaviors, you can say things like, "You are speaking so calmly." "You asked for what you wanted." "You are showing me how flexible you are." "You can be okay if situations change." Those are some kind words. "You really thought about my feelings," or your brother's feelings. Always look for the opposite of these behaviors and give them a ton of attention during that time, especially if there's one thing on this list that your child often does. Really try to focus on any time they're not doing one of those things, like complaining, for example, and talk about that specific praise when they're not complaining. Of course, we cannot ignore everything. In addition to thinking about consequences that we may need to use when our children do certain negative things, we want to think back to what we talked about before, the function of the behavior. What are the behaviors trying to communicate? For example, if we have a child who hits a lot at school every day during a certain time, you may want to find out what happens when your child hits and after your child hits. Again, think about the consequences. So let's say you figure out your child's hitting every day at the same time of day. You can think about what the activity is at school during that time and realize that maybe your child doesn't like that activity. Perhaps they learned if they hit someone, they go to the office. The people who work in the office are really nice to them and give them some coloring pages that they enjoy, and they like that better than what's going on in the classroom. They may be learning through their behavior that if they hit, they will be sent to this other place that they like better. So that's just something to consider. Sometimes we can find patterns like that, and we can work with the other adults in our child's life to come up with a new consequence after our child hits. One that won't encourage them to keep up the bad behavior, but instead will encourage them to use one of those other behaviors we want to see. Another example could be if our child becomes irritable when in the car. We might consider, okay, they don't like long car rides, but they like art. So we make an art kit for them that's appropriate for use in the car, or find out what music they like and play it in the car to make the car ride more enjoyable for them, or what books they want to read in the car, anything that can improve the situation a little bit for them. We can talk about this with them. Like, I noticed that you get really upset when we're in the car. We're going to make a plan for this. Those are some ways we can try to prevent many of the behaviors listed on your screen. Before we move on to the next topic, which will be about using consequences when we see some of these behaviors, I again want to emphasize the importance of looking at those developmental milestones and knowing what your child typically can do at their age. We don't want to give a consequence for something that our child just isn't developmentally ready for. I also want to say that if you see on a milestone checklist that your child's not doing several things or a really important thing on that list yet, please talk to the other adults in your child's life. Ask them, have you seen them do this? Give your child lots of opportunities to develop that skill. If you're not seeing it, talk to your healthcare provider about it, because there might be resources and supports that they can help you put into place to encourage your child to work on that skill. We want to make sure that if a child is behaving in a younger developmental level, that we're adjusting our expectations for them to that level too. We don't want to give them instructions that they can't follow, because then we're going to see ourselves having to use more and more consequences that may not actually be helping our child's development. Sometimes we do have to use consequences. Let's give an example of this by returning to our hitting example. If the timer goes off and your child had hit their sister a few minutes before the timer went off, we tell them, okay, we don't get to put a cotton ball in the jar this time, but I'm going to reset the timer and you're going to have another chance to get that cotton ball in the jar. But our child is feeling extremely upset. There are many things they can do when they're upset. There's nothing wrong with feeling upset. We can do our bubble breathing with them. We can put on some nice music. We can dim the lights. We can give them their favorite stuffed animal. We can have them squeeze their little fists. We have all these techniques that we can do with them, but let's say that that's just not working out right now. It's not working when we're telling them, yeah, we know you're stressed out. We know you're frustrated. This is hard, but here, you have another chance. They're still hitting. Or maybe they're throwing their toys or something else that you just can't ignore. Like if it's against a house rule that you're working on with them. So now, you need something else. You can't just wait for that entire 2 hours after they've already hit or thrown something, so they're definitely not going to get their cotton ball in the jar the next 2 hours. What do you do now during the 2-hour period? This might be a time when we want to learn how to effectively use consequences. First, we want to identify the unwanted behavior. That's going to be pretty obvious if they're throwing toys or hitting something or someone. Then, we want to give them a warning. In our warning, we can use an if-then statement. So we can say, if you throw your toy again, it will be put away for the rest of the day. Or, if you can't use gentle hands, we have to go inside. Those are the types of consequences you can give that include a warning. You're telling them, you've done this, we don't like that, that's not safe. You can give them that carefully timed explanation, and now you're going to give the warning. If you throw your toy again, it will be put up for the rest of the day. Or, you can put your toy on the shelf and we can play with something else. In the beginning, they will probably do it again because they're trying to see if you're going to be firm in your consequences. If consequences in this type of language is new for you, they may try to test you and see if you're really going to do it. You have to be prepared that whatever you said in that if-then statement when you were giving them a warning, that you follow through with it and actually give the consequence. So when you said, if you throw the toy again, it will be put up for the rest of the day, and they throw it again, you have to put the toy up for the rest of the day. You can tell them why it's not safe for you to throw that toy, and then try to look for something to praise them for as soon as you can. We know this is a lot of information, so let's take a short break. When you're ready, check out Part 7 of Module 3 on YouTube, where we will conclude this discussion.